Hola, buenos días a
Hello,
todas.
good morning. Good morning to all of you. Welcome. Welcome to this new journey of panels and reflections of Heritage Day. It's a very special day because today we conclude with these live activities of these meetings that we've been holding from November in the Museo Contemporáneo de Arte, together with Tecnológico de Monterrey. And today they organize this table that is called Universidades de las Américas and Digital Preservation. So before we start and introducing our guests today, I would like to remind you that all of these activities are being broadcasted from the Facebook page of the museum and as well from YouTube with simultaneous translation if you need to follow these broadcasting in these two platforms. So today, as we told you before, we're going to be having two panels and we are welcoming you here in Universidad de las Américas and Digital Preservation. And today at 1 p.m., we're going to be having another panel that is Digital Culture from the University. And as you can see here, we are going to be reflecting on the heritage collections and these digital collections and the university's task for having the content, for dissemination content and knowledge, among some others. So I would like to introduce our moderator of today, that is Rafael Garcia Gonzalez. Just to provide a very brief biography, he is from Monterrey, Nuevo León. He is a teacher of comparative literature in the University of Guadalajara with a specialty in literature here at Tecnológico de Monterrey. Rafael has been working as a workshop specialist, a promoter of reading, and he is currently the coordinator of the International Fair of the Book of Monterrey and professor of literature in that same university. Rafael, he's going to provide a overview of the topics that we are going to be addressing today and that we're going to be talking today. So as well, he's going to provide a bio of the panelists. So Rafael, you have the floor. And again, thank you very much for being here with us. Thank you very much, Guillermo. Oh, your micro, please. Thank you very much, Guillermo. Can you hear me? Yes, can you hear me? Okay, perfect. Thank you very much. So thank you very much, Guillermo. Good morning. Good morning to all of you. Welcome. My name is Rafael Garcia. I'm the coordinator of the International Fair of Book. So as my colleague said, today we're going to be having the table Universidades de las Américas and Digital Heritage Collection in the framework of the international meeting of BIT working that was held within the digital collection of Monterrey and MUAC of the Autonomous University of Mexico, the one that is holding this event. So the purpose of this table is to talk with colleagues of other universities and reflect on the methods, the challenges, the tools, academic liaison, and the construction of memory from the digital preservation in the university framework. And I would like to introduce our guests today. So first of all, to moderate this table, we have Jose Miguel Muñiz Apresa. He is a director of the Master's Degree of Humanity of the Tecnológico de Monterrey, and he has a PhD in philosophy in language and literature. He is a degree from the PhD program of Hispanic Studies at the University of Texas A&M. He has a degree in Spanish literature by the University of Nuevo León, and he studies the digital humanity, essay, and the relationship between literature and journalism, all of those topics that he's been working with in some conferences and some international papers. He was part of the project Cervantes from the Department of Humanities Studies in an interdisciplinary group contributing in some bibliography and digital iconography, and as well with edition of El Quijote. And he has been working as the literature journalism, and he has been the editor of books. In Mexico, he's member of the Association of the Mexican Network of Journalists of Science, and as well of the World Federation of Scientific Journalists. And as well, we have the pleasure of welcoming our three guests, Alexander Gil Fuentes, and he is a a library scientist from the University of Columbia, where he works with teachers, professors, and studies in the research of humanity, pedagogy, and the production of knowledge that involves the use of advanced computing, the design of digital media, and the network technologies. He is the main coordinator of the Boulder Library Study of the Library of the University of Columbia. And of course, that's a space of a library that is based and as well, he just conveys all of the remote studio of the virtual, and he is the co-founder and the moderator of the Group of Colombia for Experimental Methods in Humanity, the collective of cross-sectional research that is based on experiments. He is the co-creator and the co-editor of Archipelagos Journal. He is a magazine and the co-author of some conferences from the Caribbean Digital. So welcome, Alex. And as well, we have Sergio Orlando Mendez. He is a historian from the university, and as well, he's a master in by the University of Salamanca in Spain. And currently, he is in charge of the coordination of the Bank of Digital Archives in Art in Colombia from the School of Arts and Humanity at the University of Andes. And as well, he has been working in the organization, the description, and dissemination of the heritage collection of the University of La Sabana and as well in the Historic Archive. And he has been working as well with the Minister of Colombia in several historic research on the recovery of the cultural heritage. Thank you very much for being here with us, Sergio. And lastly, I would like to introduce my colleague, Lisette Sardivar Lagañaga. Then she has a degree in arts by the Plastic Arts at UNAM, and as well he has a master's degree in the School of Arts and Literature. And currently he's been studying in the practices of the museum, the National Study of Conservation, Preservation, and Museography. Between 2003 and 2012, he has been working in the National Museum of the National Institute of Bellas Artes in the National Museum of San Carlos in the educational section, and as well in the National Museum of the Palacio de Bellas Artes in the education and coordination of the exhibitions. For more than 10 years, I've been working in the field of education in museums and as well in teaching, teaching activities from 2002. And as well, she has been carrying out some research studies projects. She's currently working in the National Division of the Heritage Collection as a leader in the Tecnológico de Monterrey University. And next, I would like to give the floor to our moderator, Miguel Muñiz Apresa, just to start with this table. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Rafael, and good morning to everyone. Thank you very much for your presence here in this table, Universidades de las Américas and Digital Preservation. Well, as Rafael has already introduced these topics, so I would like to tell you that we're going to be having for our guests this dynamic that, first of all, we're going to be asking 3 questions that they're going to allow us to understand the problem in relation to digital archives. This is from the perspective of the universities of the Americas, and the dynamic is we're going to be asking a question and our guests are going to answer just following the alphabet. So all of these are going to be Alex Hill, and then we're going to continue at the end, Lisette Saldivar. And each one of them, they're going to be having 3 minutes, around 3 minutes per question. As a moderator, when we finish these 2 minutes, I'm going to briefly interrupt to tell you that you're going to be having 1 minute left. I'm going to be very brief, not to just interrupt your answers. So at the end of those questions, we're going to be having some time remaining. So we're going to be sharing with our participants and the audience all of the questions that we have from the audience. And later on as well, we're to conclude this table. So without further ado, I would like to ask this first question. So let's start from the experience of our participants in the development or the implementation of digital resources for the development of digital collections. So we understand that now we have more cultural resources in the world that are produced and are disseminated digitally. Thus, these this heritage that may be seen online. We have some publications from the magazines, from newspapers, entertainment, among several different type of contents, books, databases, that all together now is part of the world cultural heritage. So among the problems that we have in all of these digital collections, we have the technical obsolescence of those resources that we use. So the question for you is, how have you faced this problem from the experience in the creation of digital collections? So let's start with Alex Hill. Go ahead. Thank you very much, Miguel, and thank you very much for the team to inviting me to be part of this table. I have a very few time I would like to answer. In my experience, I developed several softwares using this conceptualization that is called minimum computing, that gets rid of databases and is trying to create simple objects. Because for us, we think that when we look at the history of digital technology, then we see the old technologies that are called the technology of the pollen text or plain text, as the Unix, and as well and ASCIIs, and all the way in which we compute simple ways of computing that now they have been there for 4 and 5 decades. They have been very long, and even HTML that is not as old as the old techniques, but as well it has had a very important use from the 90s up to this time, and as well we bet that it's going to last. So in that aspect, we've been developing some ways in which create digital collections that are based on plain text, and as well in the common use that we predict that they are not going to disappear very soon as a JPEG for binaries and images. Well, that's the bet that we have. We've been betting for the minimum computing, simple objects, to get rid of databases, complex systems, because although they have more power, they depend on an institutional commitment that is not exactly that is going to be there because of a budget and some agendas that change. And we've also noticed that this is about control, that we're going to go back to the second question. And that is why we've been working with this new bet. That is the bet for what is simple to what we maintain by ourselves. We don't need an institutional policy for the long run. So that would be my answer, to bet for minimum computing for what it is simple. Thank you very much, Alex. That was very interesting. Well, later on, we're going to go deeper on this minimum computing. Very interesting. Now it is the turn for Orlando. Orlando, please go ahead. You have the floor. Thank you very much, Miguel. Before we start, good afternoon to all of you, and thank you very much for inviting us to this space at the University of Los Andes. I'm going to be very specific as well. I agree with Alex. It is very important to have some system that allow us to avoid being obsolete. This means that would allow us to have a functioning throughout the time, mainly in a different systems or in different equipment. What we've done here is that to ensure this access and as well to have all of these institutional resources that may be complex and that maybe as well change. And we've seen this in the pandemic more than ever. So we use equipment, software, and open systems. We use a system that is called Omega. Probably you are familiar with this. It is open source. And with this, well, it could just serve different needs. So that's the bet that we've had, generally speaking, for the publication and just to see our digital collections. And this has worked very well because this has interoperability with the most of digital repositories worldwide. And as well, it uses a system of metadata that is doubly important, that is universal system that could allow us to identify and to recover information in different environment. We always use this together with some international guidelines and some standards of description. So we could say that we work together with this. That's in relation to the technical aspect. Now, if we talk about planning, yes, we do take into account our growth. As you said this, Miguel, yes, we do have some digital objects that exist that are native. However, in our case, most of these, those are migrated objects that we digitalize from different means. So creating this specific planning and that is very close to this. Of course, this is something that is going to change because it's not the same thing to digitalize a document or a digitalize a videotape that it may have a higher weight of this, but as well always maintaining and some parameters just to be able to understand what we would need and our type of growth. I think that this is key to have the knowledge of our institutions and our capacities, our skills. So that's what we've been bet here is to manage this growth, this scheduled growth in such a way to have some limits to have a growth and then to expand a little bit more, always thinking about our direction in terms of storage. So of course, we use some rigid systems, we use some servers, but as well, we are betting to the cloud. And that's not exactly to store things to save them, but to have a copy. Those are the points that I wanted to discuss. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Sergio. Okay, so we also have here with us another example of some other ways to approach this and the use of the open software because of course this has been very useful and we have very useful resources. Probably we may go deeper about the appropriateness of the use of the open software in our context. So thank you very much, Sergio. Lisette, please, you have the floor. Thank you very much, Miguel. This is a constant challenge. The technology is changing and it is like you're just fighting against time. So in the case of what we've been doing here in the University of Monterrey is related to the alignment to international standards. Of course, we also use our resources are stored in the institutional repository that in such a way is like the space where we currently have our site where we save and we store everything with an open access. We use this space. And as well, are organizing our information with the model of Dublin Core. So I think that that is one of the elements that are useful to promote the preservation of this information that we save, that we store. So of course, it's a continuous update. Of course, this requires to have some training from the point of view not only of the resources and the infrastructure that yes, we need to be looking for different options, but as well the staff that is managing all of these activities. Of course, they need to have a continuous training. So that's our bet for the staff, the equipment, the people that are in charge of all of these collections, that we have to be looking for options continuously to be updated. Of course, to have this space, as in the case of the institutional repository for El Tecnológico de Monterrey, is like an window in order to provide access and as well to disseminate. That's the way in which we may be able to preserve dissemination. Dissemination means as well preservation. And it's not only to preserve our archives or our academic documents, but as well all of the documents and the artistic content. Thank you very much, Lisette. As well, this is a very important topic related to dissemination, and I think that later on we're going to be talking about this. all of the formats and this search for methods and tools is a fundamental aspect within the activities of the collection and what we do to create all of these digital archives. And is one of the problems that we have to consider towards the future, that is the preservation of all of these materials. So we're gonna leave a couple of minutes and later on we're gonna go back and to discuss in further detail if the time allows us. So the second question that we have that is for our guests, it is related to the dissemination of these of the work, just thinking about this free access to collections that is like a bridge that is generated between the universities and the community. It may be an academic community. So the question is, what could be the most urgent needs to have and free access to digital collections? Please go ahead. Well, the most important risk that we have here is just to convey these contents to the private sector. So all of these equipment that is based and even Omeka, those are these they need a technical knowledge and to be updated in a very intense way. So as how we've seen all of these institutions moving bit by bit from rich to poor institutions to export all of these tasks to the private sector, I see that there's a real danger as the cultural heritage of humanity, because the private sector has some other interests, some other goals and agendas, and that is not exactly that they are aligned to public access or the public well-being. So in that aspect, the minimum computing tries to address the control that we have on our collections. By reducing the complexity of systems, I could say that even Omeka is a medium level of complexity too. By reducing the complexity of the system, we may train more students, more people that are going to be within the academy to maintain those systems for the future, and in such a way to prevent this leakage towards the private sector. So for example, these space, they have very complex databases. As Lisette knows, she said, we need to maintain and working together. So sharing all of this data, because it's not only about what we have in the surface of the interface, but this is about being able to share data for those working with algorithms to understand culture with a computing method, that as well for those that are going to be taking those collections when our equipments go down and they have to rebuild them. So we need a way to share data, to be accessible, to be easy, simple. So we could have this future migration. So of course, we now need to simplify even more to get away from the D space and as well to get closer to methods that may be useful for the immediate publication and dissemination of our collections, but at the same time, looking towards the future to convey those data, to have an easy convention, just to convey all of this data with those simple formats that we all know how to use. That would be my answer. Control and simplifying things. Very interesting because, of course, it's going to be useful with some needs as well as in relation to training and the level of specialization for all of us working in all of those collections. Of having all of these disciplines and training, we're going to be talking about this later on. This is very interesting. Thank you very much, Alex. Sergio, please go ahead. Thank you very much, Miguel. So here I see very important topics in relation to the freedom of the free access to information. One is about digital infrastructure and the other one is about the copyright. So in the first one, I agree with Alexander. It is very important to have these free systems, more than free or open to simple system that would allow us to have an interoperability. In Baghdad, what we do is that we have a double creation or a double source of data, because always, it is very important to have the experience that we have from the collections, to have a source of information that would allow us to have the data, and that we may have these and we may recover it. Because, well, tomorrow, if we don't have access to an online catalog, or if there is a failure on the internet, and then the libraries and the repository of the art and cultural heritage collection are not going to stay there, we have to continue functioning and working. So this is something that has been talked about by researchers, and as well the scholars of all of these topic of the society of information, and this may happen. So of course, if we have simpler ways of having this information, because thinking about a table is not an absurd thing to do. It's like a backup and all of the library scientists we should have. I see that the digital infrastructure is complex because the penetration of the internet that we have is not the best one. As in Colombia, we have uh, a very low penetration of the internet, and the pandemic as well show this. It is difficult to have a content online, to upload images or video. So I think that this is one of the fields that we have to address, mainly to the digital development, to work in a better infrastructure, because this is what is going to ensure to have a free access. In the second point, I was talking about the copyrights, and this is something that is truly important because this has been complex. It's have been adding some complexity to what we do. So we have some records of some artists that are within all of those archives, and we want to disseminate those within the academy. But all of those photographs, they have some rights, because it may be a producer, or this photography was bought by someone that is the owner of the rights. So with this, we may provide a service, but it is not a mass service. So among all of these copyright, we have a public communication, and that is the one that avoids us to communicate openly certain type of communication information. So I think that we're going to be finding some constraints, because in small archives or in collections that are not so important, we won't have any problem. But it's going to be very complex with a large collection of these popular artists. So that is where people is going to be looking at an important heritage value, monetary value. So we're going to be facing a problem there. We've had that before, and that is something that we may be able to solve just with a dialogue, creating more networks, creating some important connections that would allow us to understand the dimension of the information and the importance it has for the audience, for the general audience, or for an academic community. Thank you very much, Sergio. Lisette, please go ahead. I agree with my colleagues, with Alex y Sergio. The easy recovery of information is key in order to have this access, and that is something that it has been discussed, and this is something that we need to review just to reach to an evolution to having this openness of our collections. On the other hand, yes, for sure, the copyright laws has been relevant in the field of the art. That in my specific case, that I'm in charge of the art collection, we have an important opportunity area that we need to open the reflection on all of those legal topics in relation to the copyright, the respect and safeguarding all of these artistic objects and digital archives of art. Now, of course, it we need to convey them, and sometimes it is bureaucratic, where we have several interests of people that they don't enable this type of free access. Laws are very clear, and we need to have a lot of authorization to use those archives and those images. And that is an important area where we may be able, from the universities, to reflect on this. At least I think that in Mexico, we have more constraint compared to other countries. But I think that we have an opportunity area where we make an impact as universities and as academic institutions to promote the dissemination and free access. And I think that's where we have a very important opportunity area. Thank you very much, Lisette. Yes, that is right. Those topics, as what you said in the case of Sergio and you, the copyright, that is a very important topic, fundamental in the development of those collections and the possibility of disseminating them for the use in all of the communities. So yes, I think that it is a very interesting topic. Okay, so we're reaching to the third question. We're going to be having some time to have a dialogue among all of us. Okay, so let's ask this last question that we had prepared for all of you. If we think about the academic center or the cultural center and universities as a space of application, experimentation of methods and tools for the creation of collections, in which other spaces of our sociocultural environment do you think that we need to apply those same methods and tools for the creation of digital collections? So where should we address all of those methods? That's a question that requires more than 3 minutes to answer this question. I'll try to summarize this in these 3 minutes. Of course, we need to take this out from this marble tower. We're talking about different structures, the difference that we have between rural and urban. It's not only in Colombia, of course, it is shown in different ways, even in this rich country that is the US. So even throughout the world, we see so many ecosystems, work ecosystems, and what we have here in the heritage. And as well, generally speaking, for example, in the Dominican Republic, we have some few PhD professors that teach on the human science. We have as well some countries censoring the humanity content. I've worked in Cuba, in Sudan, where we have an Islamic and authoritarian government, and we've been having to work not only on the differences of the structure, but as well paying attention to the differences of the way of having this social expression where this free access is not exactly universal aspect that is going to be applied throughout the world, but something that we have to analyze in each one of the places, taking into account the differences in the infrastructure. In Cuba, we only have the penetration of the 9%, and taking into account as well the different policies to express that would allow us to carry out these activities. So in that aspect, what is closer to a universal activity of education where we may convey these methods to our colleagues, that not only all of the people working among us independently, all of us, we need to learn from the ones that are working outside of this Marvel Tower, where we have a common point of view that is the technology of the computation, all of these plain text systems, all of these is within all of the computers. It doesn't matter the place, and we may create archives and may be useful outside of the internet. So we need to work with communities outside of the university to learn, to teach, to create together some system that may be functioning within these different fabrics that we're going to be having in these different places to create collections that may be useful in USB drives and the internet and the phone. I may talk about this topic for 1 hour, but well, that would be all. My answer would be there in 3 minutes. Just let's go out of this tower. That would be my message. Okay, so we're gonna go deeper on this because being out of this tower, of course, is what it was mentioned before. And I'm gonna link this with the other question that is related to the needs. The need of training and to get to approach these other methods and tools, scientific methods. And I'm thinking about training all of these individuals working with these sciences. that is the field of the humanities. Sergio, please. Thank you very much, Miguel. Of course, we need to get out of this ivory tower, but because of the experience that we had in Badak, we've also noticed that we need to create a digital literacy. This may sound funny or makes us feel concerned because, yes, digital literacy, but if we are the generation of the new technologies, yes, it is important to teach best practices for preserving the information. So being able to having artists, scholars, people that manage all of these archives that was before the digital conservation and what we have right now. We have people that are creating digitally, and we've noticed some general lines, not in all of the cases, that individuals that were before the fourth industrial revolution and as well the digital revolution, they had a system, a more concrete organization system. They knew better how to organize this information, to save it. And I think the analog world provides us with all of these guidelines. We didn't have at hand or on a mobile or on a computer or on the cloud. So we had to preserve this information. And with this, the trend is that I have 1,000 copies. I generate a lot of digital trash. So I feel that the context where all of us would be working towards is the one of the creators, of researchers and artists, because now we see some researchers having a lot of information because they recover the digitalization, photography, interviews, videos, multi-format content, having different versions. We have a version that is the product, but it lacks organization. So I think that the methods that we should be applying in the context that are useful would be that, because this is the beginning of this production. That's how our work would have a sense. And if we address this problem from its roots, and if we want to apply very specific methods and methods that be intuitive, simple to use, and I think that in the schools and universities, they should be teaching digital literacy, to use tools. For example, a tool that is Word, that it's a great tool of edition, having thousands of possibilities, not only to write, but as well to optimize. Is the same thing with Excel and the Office suite and all of these open source programs and so many others that exist. So I think that we should be addressing from that point all of these problems. We have a lot of simple methods to organize our personal archives or the research archive, to just encode these, connect these, to provide special data, basic metadata, to be able to have an interconnection with some other databases and being able to recover information. So just to conclude, we live in the society of information, but it is the society of hyperinformation. We have so much information that we're not able to retrieve this information. And well, we have now more digital trash. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Sergio. Now we have another topic that is related to the digital gap in our countries and in the context in Latin America, and the problem of connectivity, that I think that they also play a very important role in this process of digital literacy. It is a very interesting topic, Lisette. I completely agree to what Sergio said. Yes, I do think that there is a need to promote training, to train ourselves, all of us. Yes, it is relevant what he said about the digital trash. Yes, we just get full of information and we don't know even how to manage this. If we talk about our environment and our setting, that is the academy and universities, yes, we do have a very important need of training specialists in digital preservation. and digital collections. Yes, we need to have an interconnection as universities to promote all of these tools, all of these models, best practices, and from the creators as well. For me, it is very relevant to what Sergio said, from the artist, from the researcher, to have a collection manager, to have all of this information as polished as possible, because yes, sometimes we need to organize this information. And of course, this is a very valuable task. And this would contribute to what is called the cultural heritage from the digital field. And I do think that the creators may have this approach, because sometimes the creators, and mainly during this time, technology is like a tool, an essential tool. It has always been for the artist, but now if we talk about the digital field, now it's easier to have all of this dialogue, and we may be able to feed from the origin the digital object to preserve it from the artist, from this training. Yes, it is an opportunity area that we need to add. As in the case of universities, we need to contribute and to link all of these training activities, to link all of different knowledge, because what we've seen in the digital preservation is related to different type of knowledge, with the fact that we need different type of specialists that communicate among themselves, and to connect all of these international standards in order to carry out the best practices in the framework of cultural institutions, or if we have collections. We need to have an articulated communication. It is essential of disseminating. If we would have more people having this type of training that is more focused on specific type of knowledge, I think that this would contribute to pay off all of this problem that it's urgent. Because yes, we do have so much information, and the production of content, and having this articulation may be a little bit complex. Thank you very much, Lisette. So we reach the end of the questions that we've scheduled for you. Now we have a couple of minutes to talk to the audience. If we do have questions, I would like to ask our colleagues that are monitoring this, the media and the Facebook channel and the YouTube channel, to see if we have questions. But meanwhile we receive those questions, I would like to just go back to this last point that is related to this proposal, of this idea that what Sergio mentioned before, and that Lisette also talked about this, about digitalization. Oh, this training in digitalization, or the digital literacy. So I would like to provide a context of Latin America, or in the social context that we live in. And as I said before, this challenge that is stemming from the connectivity problems that we have in those countries. And in that aspect, how this may impact in your experience in the development of the collections, how this has been impacting all of these circumstances, these social circumstances of these countries, for the generation of digital projects that may have an impact and that may contribute to this interaction with the communities. Of course, thinking about the openness of the collections and the impact that we expected to have in the communities. I don't know if you would like to share your experience. I would like to share the experience that I've had in the Caribbean, where we have a very important space to think about this, because we have so many languages and traditions in the Caribbean. And to pay attention to the differences, that is not exactly a difference in the structure or policies, but as well cultural differences. given the fact that connectivity is limited. For example, to work with Omega, we need to have connectivity. However, and of course, with this space is the same thing. However, I also noticed that within the English and French communities, there's a concept of what is called community archives. It is named in English. So this concept hasn't been developed in Spanish speaking countries. And it is very interesting to see this. I've seen this in South America because mainly in the South Cone, in Argentina and in Chile, we have very good projects of community archives. I haven't seen this in Colombia, but I don't know if you may talk about this topic. In this aspect, we have so many communities just using Omega without any connection to the university, and they start creating their own digital collections because software is very easy to learn. Of course, we need to have this literacy, but we have some sectors of a society, they do have it. So they use it by themselves without support from anyone to create these community archives for the cultural heritage of their people or their small neighborhood of a city. And there are so many examples in the Caribbean from the French and English speaking countries. And I don't know exactly what is happening in these other traditions, but in the Dominican Republic, when we had a panel 2 years ago, 2 weeks ago, when we talked about this, and the library scientist of my country said, "And what is that?" Because everything is done through an institution. So I wanted to point out that in Latin America as well, when we talked about Latin America, we need to consider the cultural differences, not only the differences in infrastructure or the policies. As well, there are some concepts that haven't been developed as the topic and are considered within the universe of the best practice. We haven't addressed this. I don't know if the other panelists see all of those cultural differences. Thank you very much, Alex. Sergio? Oh, yes, we do have these cultural differences, and I would like to add the generational difference that now we are in the middle of a sandwich. I've been in touch with students that are digital natives that were born from 2000 or centennials that they don't know about analog formats and Super 8 or slide. So it is very complex, right? Because then we have an analog literacy besides the digital literacy. And as well, Marta Peirano, in her book, The Enemigo No es el Sistema, she says that digital literacy reached to a point that digital natives, they don't know why in their inboxes they have a ZC and a CO, and they don't know the purpose for that. So some studies are showing this, that is a copy, right? And a hidden copy, that those are basic things that we may have. And I think that besides all of these cultural differences, we have another one that is the difference of generation and what you said about the digital gap, that is not only that older people or our grandparents not having connectivity, but even we have a level of a lack of knowledge because we have all of these platforms and social media where we only use the basic thing. And Alex, now you made me think about the community archives, and I related these with the phenomenon of, well, it's not exactly a phenomenon, but it's a practice that is the cultural practices. And the thing is that peoples are structured in the small communities, small municipalities. They don't have an structured archives like the one that we all know, but they have a place that is called the cultural house. And in this cultural house, we have not only some books, but as well part of the cultural heritage of a people. We have photographs and pictures. So those are that type of initiative. And it really just drew my attention because it's a practice that we find in Colombia. So I relate this to what you said, and it would be important just to address this. to look at this and to see what it has been done. I'm sure that the network of libraries in Colombia and the network of archives in Colombia is working towards that, at least to centralize this or to map it. But yes, and now I'm thinking about this. And thank you very much for that information. It is very important. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Sergio. Liz? Well, both of you make me think a lot of these aspects. What you say about Argentina and Chile, I think that they are doing something with Dynacant, and I think Pedro Angeles is the one that has been sharing with us all of his approach that he has with them, and they are in the process with UNAM as well. But it is very relevant to talk about this, how all of these spaces that are open in order to have a free access and to build in a free way and in an open way the construction of this heritage. I think that is very interesting. And that is the path to follow in the case of the people that are doing different type of cultural heritage. And it is not only this tangible heritage, like in the case of our collections, and that is the tangible heritage, but as well what is intangible of what is in an event. For example, the event that we are holding right now, I think that is very interesting. This type of meetings where we as well preserve in a place. This is another field of the heritage that we are preserving and is related to all of this technological progress and the practice of the communities and what they have in relation to the cultural content. I think that is something that, at least in Mexico, it has a long path to go. I think that this approach is going to take time. And yes, if there's a gap, as you said before, this digital gap, we don't have this complete freedom to have access to the internet or to have access as we would like to have for the cultural archives. Yes, it is a paradox because on one hand we have rights. Yes, you do have the right to the access of culture. However, this is not completely done. We don't have this legal provision to exercise this right. So this is part of the reflections that we're gonna take with us and to contribute with this. Thank you very much, Lisette. Yes, we have huge challenges. And while we wait for some questions to arrive, oh, meanwhile, I would like to say something as well. I need to point out that the content of this heritage in Latin America and in the Caribbean as well, it is going to impact the way in which we are going to think about the technological futures that we're going to be creating together. Because I don't think that the solution is only to copy the models from North America or from Europe, having the money and the capacity to develop with a more with a more stable structure, but the content of our history, the conquer, the colonialism, the independence movement. So all of these past that now we is going to be building our present societies. Of course, we need to recover these because those 500 years after we they are as well after Columbus. Then sometimes they want to erase all of this history as all of these government systems that we've lived here in Latin America. So this is a challenge. And towards the future, for example, I don't know if the audience has some questions. So as well, we need to think how to develop our systems that are aware all of these tasks of recovering the different races, the different civilizations that were found here in America, and now we are the result of the contemporary society. And of course, this is a long task to do that we have in the century 21, and this is a call to all of my colleagues in Latin America and the Caribbean, just to take this challenge and to be very serious about this. This goes beyond basic literacy. I'm talking to the experts. We are the ones that work with this. We need to take this challenge, or the trainees to take this challenge. Thank you very much, Alex. Lisette, Sergio, I don't know if you would like to share something, to share the ideas in relation to Alex's proposition. Oh, I wanted to say something in relation to what you said, Lisette, and that is the challenge of retrieving what is not tangible. Alex, you talk about our culture and our richness. We have a country that is completely diverse. As well, if we move away 2 hours from a place, we have another accent, we have some differences, ethnographic differences, and this is translated into the art, literature, and culture, this tangible culture. But the most important thing, and that's where we have the biggest challenge, and mainly in relation to infrastructure and resources, is to document all of this intangible heritage, the oral tradition, how it is expressed, how they talk, how they cook. It is not as simple to do. We need to have an infrastructure and a huge development. If we see this from with the digital perspective, we need to have a digital space, because we're talking about the sounds recording, we're talking about videos, we are talking about as well the tours in 3D or 360 tours. I mean, all of the possibilities that we may take from the technology, but that exactly where we need to go, because this is the most fragile thing. If we have the oldest person of town died, then we lose all of their experience, the way in which they prepare a dessert or the tradition, those basic things that we have within a community, but they are so fragile. I wanted to mention this. That's exactly where we have to just address our efforts, and as well just the way in which we look for resources. Thank you very much, Sergio. Lisette, go ahead. Very briefly, what you both are saying is very relevant to open in space, because we talk about this all the time, to open, to be alert. And what Sergio said reminds me of an exhibition that was shared by a colleague in the School of Restoration. And she was explaining this project, and that is to recover the intangible memory in an exhibition that is not exactly related to placing images, but then they show this intangible memory, the process of preparing some food, as what you said. I think that is very interesting. So how we recorded this exhibition, well, we have all of these different levels of heritage in the digital preservation are very challenging. You were talking about sounds, food, smells. How can we recover this? I think that we have a huge effort in different countries, and I think that in Latin America, we have some structures that would allow us to have this, but with a huge effort. And I think that what the National Phonothek does, we do have a lot of efforts that are being done to recover this. And sometimes this is not enough. This intention or this effort that, yes, it is an area that we have as a responsibility to contribute. But well, thank you very much, Miguel. Thank you very much. And I think that with this, this last contribution is our conclusion because well, we just reached the end of this session. So thank you very much for your time, Alex Hill, Lizeth Saldivar, Sergio Mendez. Thank you very much for sharing with all of you, with all of us, your ideas of all of these challenges that we have in relation to the creation of digital collections. And as well, we talked about the technical aspect, about the needs of the development, and as well, learning, the learning process in relation to the formats to have a better preservation of all of this content. Of course, we also talked about the problem of a copyright. We touched this briefly, but it is very important as an important element within this topic. And at the end, I think that now I'm just thinking about an idea that Alex shared before that is related to the role that we have in this case as the creators of these collections and the history. Yes, we also preserve our content, we create all of these archives, but as well we have a speech over there. Yes, we do have the possibility of creating a dialogue and speech in the communities, and the work that we have in all of these community centers just makes sense, and the way in which we may approach to all of these efforts, the community efforts, institutional efforts for our space, for our geography and our cultural space to talk about ourselves from that same statement. So, as creators and narrators of this history, and for me, it is a very important topic and a very interesting topic as well to continue exploring. So, thank you very much again. Thank you very much for your time. This has been very interesting to listening to your statements. And now I would like to give the floor to Guillermo. Thank you very much for your
Muchas
time.
gracias, Miguel. Muchas
Thank
gracias,
you very
Rafael,
much, Miguel. Thank you very much,
Alex,
Rafael, Lisette,
todos los que
Sergio,
nos
Alex, and
acompañaron
to all of the people that were
canales
connected
digitales de
here
nuestra mesa.
and as well by the digital
Solamente
channels of
ahorita
the
les hemos
museum.
puntual
I would like
para
to mention
terminar.
something very
Recuerden
briefly to
que
conclude
en el
and
sitio de
remember that in
Patrimonio,
the site
que
of
es
Patrimonio en un bit, that is
Patrimonio Vita, van a poder encontrar los videos
mac.com.mx,
tanto
you may
de
find the
las mesas
videos
anteriores
of
como de
the
esta
previous
propia mesa,
tables and
así
as
como
well
de
of
los
this
videos que
table and some other
participantes el
videos
día de
that
hoy
the
han mandado con
participants of
anterioridad,
today just sent before,
extendiendo un poco los conceptos y los temas que ya
expanding
se
on the
dijeron el día de
topics
hoy.
and the concepts that we
Y
discussed
también
today.
el segundo aviso es
And
que
the
en una
second
hora
notice is that
exactamente
in
cada
1 hour
vamos a
at 1
tener
p.m., we're going
el
to be
panel del
having
día y el
the
último
second
panel
panel of
que
the
es
day
para
and the last
concebir
panel
diálogo cultural
of Patrimonio en un bit that is
desde la
called Digital
universidad,
Culture from the
organizado por
university
Myrna
that is
Ortega,
organized by
donde
Myrna
vamos a
Ortega.
seguir
Where as well
discutiendo
we're going to
sobre estos
continue
temas tan
talking about all
interesantes
of
y tan
these very
retadores
interesting
como
and challenging
tanto
topics
social como
at a
técnico como político
social,
que los
technical, and political
participantes
level that the
también han
participants
dado
of
en mucho.
this table just share
Entonces,
with
bueno,
us.
les agradezco a todos nuevamente,
Thank you
gracias al
very
equipo
much to all of you.
allá en el
Thank you very
museo y
much
también
for
estamos
the
esperando ya en
team
octubre
in the
para
museum,
continuar
and
esta
we're going to be back
conversación.
at 1 p.m. to continue with this conversation.